Good morning. Good morning. I'm super excited. Uh, Super excited to talk about um, my opinions on a lot of the announcements that Trump has released the last couple of days, but primarily uh, the his plans for the Department of Education and a lot of the bureaucrats, pretty much. Um, I'm I'm really excited that Ramaswamy and Elon Musk is put on this team as must say Doge. This guy is such a troll. I love it. It's very refreshing to be able to see someone that's not a politician get into politics or in some form of government where they can actually make a difference. Um, I trust personally. I do trust people like Vivek, people like Elon Musk, to do better for the economy and to make certain cuts that I think that these politicians won't be able to do or won't do. I'm starting to believe that people of business or that have a big background, not that I'm starting to believe that, I've always believed that, but it's starting to become a little bit more apparent to me that people who come from a business background are a little bit more competent to be able to run a government. I know that there's a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about that, but I would say is try to keep an open mind, just because at this point in time, where are we right now, right? When we look at our economy, when we look at a lot of our policies, when we look at the inflation, many different, all the things that's going on right now, and the only people to blame is the government. I mean, that's the truth. So why not be open to the idea of people that are not politician, non that are not politicians to come into the government, given a specific role that they have proven in the private sector to solve, and allow them to um, make the government or make the country run a little bit more efficient. I think it's only fair that we keep an open mind when it comes to these people that Trump is electing, just because that's the reason why we elected him. It's also the reason why, no matter how you look at it, um, people no longer have faith in the government. People no longer trust in politicians because of their lack of transparency and the way that they've um, the propaganda that they've been spewing regarding, all these identity, race politics, and whatnot. But I want to talk about. There's a couple of things I think the Department of Education should definitely get dismissed. I know there's a lot of fear mongering about about, oh, this is going to be one of the worst things ever and all the other things. Yeah, but right now we're one of the worst. This is the worst it's ever been. The Department of Education. We have, at least in New York City, um, about $45,000 are spent on children, unfortunately, and Black American children, whereas $20,000 is spent on a regular child, or rather a regular student, in maybe a better school. And you would think that the students that are getting more funding, because they are in more need, they would the return on that will be, um, you think that they would perform better, but it seems like they're performing worse. And since the 1970s, the Department of Education has had played a big role into the way our education system run in the U.S. And they've done a terrible job. It's like since 1970 to now, we've gotten worse. This is the greatest country in the world, right? It doesn't matter how you see it, whether you're how you feel about this country. This is the greatest country in the world. People come into this country, not leave. And to think that with all the technical advancements that we've had over the last 20 years or the last 10 years, all the different ways of the way we innovated many different fields and many different sectors, you would think that we should be the leaders, or rather the leaders of education in the world, and we're not. It's actually embarrassing that we're not. And I blame the Department of Education. That's their job, right? But the problem is that, and like many bureaucracies, um, they're made to create jobs, not to necessarily to solve problems. And that's the problem with government, where it starts to become inefficient because they can't narrow down what's the problem. Like, look at, I always bring up California. California is a great example to, like, to show why a lot of these social policies don't work. We spent tens of billions of dollars to solve the homeless issue, the homeless crisis that we have in California, and it's gotten worse over the last 10 years. And Gavin Newsom has been the governor all this time for the last 10 plus years, if I'm not mistaken. Thank God his term is up, and he's no longer going to be in office, hopefully. But yeah, man, it's just these bureaucracies are trash. They just are not efficient. They are terrible. They are there to just create jobs, not necessarily to solve problems. And I'm actually very glad that we can get rid of the Department of Education. I think the FBI has to go too. The FBI has fallen into corruption and has been like that for many, many years. And I'm sure a lot of people back in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s would agree with that too. But I'm just gonna give you, like, in this video, I'm gonna give you like different clips and different ways to look at it. I do think that there's something to be said about when kids in poor neighborhoods are being spent. There's almost double the amount of money that's being sent to these kids, these students, in these poor neighborhoods, and despite that, they are underperforming even at the standard that they're given. Right? I do believe that you eliminate the Department of Education would allow for schools to compete with each other. I think also limiting students to a certain a zone school based on their zip code is terrible, right? Like in private school, right, the best students compete to get into these schools, and when you have these students competing to get to schools, the schools will get the best performing students, right, or for the most part anyway. And these schools will also hire the best teachers. So now you created a system, a competitive system where we're going to get the best teachers. We're going to hire the best teachers. We're going to accept the best students, and our education system is going to compete against some of the other top schools around the world, or rather around the country. So we're going to compete against these other schools and have our students get into some of the better education institutes, like, people, NYU, Harvard, Yale, et cetera, right? That's what you want. You want schools to be able to compete with each other, not given the same template that they give everyone. And I think you're seeing that more and more and more. And I don't want to. I know I've had discussions with other teachers and saying like, hey, the standards have increased, or it has increased. And I don't know if that's true. I do think that the standard has lowered. We've allowed illiterate people to pass, even though they're illiterate, and just so that you can get a certain amount of funding from the government or Department of Education, just so that you can keep this job. And I don't think that's right. But again, I'm going to show you a couple of videos, and this is what I mean about like just keep an open mind, right? I think that these cuts are going to do better for the economy, and it will create a different environment for schools to be able to compete with each other, and allow students to receive different opportunities. Because I think that clearly spending more money on students is not working. If anything, it's making it worse. But I'm going to show you a couple of videos just to keep an open mind how the different perspective, and then also go over like how the media has used this as a means of propaganda. Cora. So you take a look at this. This guy named Mean Kevin, right? He's a YouTuber, business guy, very, 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 very smart individual. And the way that he breaks down how it would affect the economy if there were cuts, and even him being a little bit more, he states his objective opinion about the situation as a whole. But just take a look at this.
Really efficient. I'm going to separate government efficiencies and inefficiencies and our opinions about government efficiencies and what we think about, the DMV and all that for a moment. And I'm going to go from a different angle. I'm going to go from the economist angle just for a moment. Let's say if we have a $6.5 trillion budget, as Donald Trump has referenced here, over 10 years, that means our government is spending $60 trillion. Let's now say that Vivek and Elon recommend, which they can recommend a lot of things, and they probably will. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump is going to implement all of those things. It's just sort of an advisory role. It's a title. It gets you, reputation within the White House and within government. It's cool. But let's say they're able to eliminate 10%. I think they'll probably try to recommend a whole lot more. They'll probably over the next 10 years out of a 60.5, and the budget will go up too, right? At the end of 10 years, it'll probably be at like $100 trillion total budget, which is crazy for 10 years. Crazy to think about that. That's 6.5 per year times 10 with a lot of growth. It just keeps going up. So think about that for a moment. Let's say they eliminate 10% of that total, so just to make it easy, 10 trill. Not all of that is going to be labor. Usually our payroll costs, when we think about contracting, are going to be about 50% for labor, 50% for material.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's sometimes we act as if it's just jobs that get cut, right? And it's not necessarily only that. Obviously, we do want to send more money into certain tools and material that we can use to help, I guess, certain institutes. Let's say, like, now all kids get like these iPads, right? That's all great and stuff, but I think that a lot of that is unnecessary. But that's me.
This is how you know I'm in real estate. Okay, how much is that paint job gonna cost? $3,000 in paint. Call it $3K in labor. Add some Biden inflation in there. All right, maybe $4K labor. All right, fine. So in that case, you're talking about cutting $5 trillion of labor. Now, the velocity of money, not of savings, not of stock investments, but the velocity of money, of income that people receive, assuming, let's say, everybody that is getting cut works, and unfortunately, there's paycheck to paycheck. That means 50% or $5 trillion getting cut over a 10-year period, times a velocity of money of 4, means we are cutting about $20 trillion. 5 times 4. That's because every dollar somebody earns and spends is worth about $4 to $5 of GDP in the economy, right? You spend $1, you spend it on a hot dog, that person goes and buys material, that person hires people, they spend money, right? That's the velocity cycle. Anyway, if, again, 100 trillion over 10 years, you cut half of it, or half of 10% of it, that's 5 trillion. Velocity of money times 4. That means cutting the effective GDP impact of about $20 trillion over a 10-year period. That is the equivalent of cutting 1 full year of GDP out of the economy. Now, the thesis is, if the government runs...
Just imagine that, right? You legit can cut $20 trillion in 10 years just for cutting some of these programs, and that are not even solving the job. They're not even doing the job right. But let's keep on.
Leaner, and this is where it gets confusing, and then I got to go bowling. You can actually step out for a second if you don't mind. Here, Lauren, you want to come on out? All right. Take a look, by the way, at this awesome wrap we've got here. We got the beautiful, beautiful matte black wrap. Think about, you cut 1 year of GDP out, you're guaranteeing a recession. Unless, of course, you offset that.
Very true. And there's something I want to say as in terms of some of these cuts. I do believe that it's going to go down first. I think that this first year, there's going to be so much changes, so many different changes, and it's going to have a kind of like a roller coaster effect to the economy and to our way of living. But I think towards the end of his Trump's term, you're going to see how it's going to just drastically improve everything, just not one thing or another, but everything.
Via a lot of tax cuts, because now the government needs to take in less money. And why did that open? I don't know why that opened. Oh, it's got like the little auto sensor that thinks I want it open. Okay, Elon. Anyway,
this guy's funny.
If you can now offset that by collecting that much less money in taxes, and people spend the money that they're saving in taxes, then you can keep the economy going.
Correct.
So it could work. And my whole point of this is to say there are 2 things you have to consider here. It's not just cutting, but it's what happens after those cuts. Are you cutting and then reducing your taxes? Or are you taking that money and then just paying off government debt? Now, I'm not saying paying off government debt is a bad idea. You could do that. But that would be a lot more recessionary than cutting taxes. So best case scenario, if you cut, you lower taxes. Now businesses are hopefully incentivized to hire people who are laid off, because cutting $5 trillion of labor over 10 years is going to affect a lot of jobs. I mean, think about it. 10% of potential federal government workers, that's a lot. I mean, we've already heard they might consider getting rid of the Department of Education. Donald Trump's fluctuated on this one because he's had some ideas around, okay, well, if we get rid of the Department of Education, some states are still going to need help. Some states are better at education than others. California, by the way, highest tax rates next to Manhattan in the country, yet we're in the bottom 20% of schools.
That's unbelievable. California should be, if not number 1, number 2. That's unbelievable.
Need a lot of help. That's why when I ran for governor, I ran on the idea of...
And there's no excuse to that. It just means that you guys don't know how to run your schools. The government is so inefficient that they've allowed a state that produces one of the most money in the world. I think it has the 6th highest GDP in the world. You know what I'm saying? California. And it's a shit show. It's a shit show.
Premise, the plan of what we call future schools, trade schools, tech skills, a lot of financial education. Anyway. So what ends up coming out of this plan is going to be, or this sort of doge, if you will, is going to be really interesting because it needs to be comprehensive. It's not just, all right, kill the FBI and kill the DOE.
Correct.
Fine. Who's going to pick it up? How are we going to establish something better?
Yep.
You can't just, as they said with healthcare, you can't just repeal. You have to repeal and replace.
Yep.
So how are you going to do that with the DOE? Do you then just provide more funding to the states? But then are states just taking that money and then hiring the same government workers that you had hired? And then you really didn't save any money because now you're potentially at a federal level giving more of that money to states, and it's still in the hands of government, really. You really haven't changed anything. So there.
Yeah, so that is a big concern too, right? And this is the problem why this is why I say the left does a really good job with the propaganda or their fear mongering when it comes to all these cuts and all these Trump is gonna do all these different things. Yes, if you completely, I don't believe in reform at all. I don't think that there should be any type of reform in the Department of Education. It does not work. It just has proven to not work. There's no need to continue to have a program that is not working. So get rid of it and you find a better replacement for it. I think that's the best way to go about it. Now, the concern is that it's possible. It's like engineering. There's many times where you're given a project and you look at the code and you look at, you as an engineer, you judge the previous engineer or the previous team that worked on it. And you're like, hey, why did they build these things a certain way? And then then you decide to build it from scratch. And as you're building it from scratch, you're building, you realize you actually end up building the same exact thing that the previous engineer built without you actually realizing. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I understand why it was built a certain way because it solved the problem in this manner. And that tends to happen a lot, right? But when it comes to people that work in the private sector, their way of essentially solving problems allows you to get a little bit creative of how you're going to start building a new product, right? And this is what we're doing. We're essentially building a new product. And yes, I know that running a government and a private company is not necessarily the same, but fundamentally it is. You're still developing a product. You're hiring the right personnel for it. You're solving problems. That's what it is at the end of the day. I know that the private sector, you might be a little bit more inclined of benefiting yourself, right? Whereas in government, you're not supposed to, but it does happen where you're essentially working for the people. I don't buy that bullshit. I think most 99% of entrepreneurs, whenever they build something, they're doing it for more good reasons than not, right? They don't think about only the money. Yes, the money's gonna come, and you probably get a nice bag out of it. But in reality, they are doing it for the well-being of whatever it is that they're working for. So that's that. I believe that more often than not.
There are a lot of questions here, but I will say, if there's anybody who knows how to cut, it's Elon Musk.
Man, and Elon Musk, when he bought Twitter, when he got Twitter, he said everyone with the last number of their social security, if it's even, you're fired. And then did it again. So this guy cut 75, I think it was, or 80% of his workforce, and Twitter did not crash. Can you explain that to me? Like, just think about it logically. You have a guy that purchased a product, a social media product, that millions, I think, if not billions, of people use Twitter, and the amount of transactions that is taking place, it has not crashed, and he got rid of almost 80% of the workforce. How? You know why? Because 80% of the workforce wasn't doing shit, and that's just like the government. Get rid of it. There's no need to have extra people just laying around doing nothing all day. This is what the government does. It's so inefficient. But like, again, this is how I see things. I see things in a certain way where, hey, I no longer trust the government with spending, right? A couple months ago, I was part of a conversation of the way of New York City and their plans on helping deal with traffic, and they were increasing the prices, or rather, they were going to start charging people in a certain bridge, a certain toll in one of the bridges in New York. I didn't know. I wasn't really paying attention to the conversation, but you realize it's like, hey, every single time the government tries to solve a problem, they just charge more money. How? Why? We don't need to charge more money. The government is already making a lot of money. We should be able to find means, efficient ways to spend this money so that it makes our lives easier. But again, I believe that all bureaucracies are created to create jobs. They're not to solve problems. And I'm gonna show you this couple of videos. Like this is what you mean. This is what I mean by this is the president of Argentina. He got elected this year, if not earlier last year. And this is what he did when he became an elected president. Brilliant.
Ministerio de Turismo y Deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera. Aunque te resistas. Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología e Innovación, afuera. Ministerio de Trabajo, Empleo y Seguridad Social, afuera. Ministerio de Educación, Adoctrinamiento, afuera. Ministerio de Transporte, afuera. Ministerio de Salud, afuera. Ministerio de Desarrollo Social, afuera. Se acabó el curro de la política. ¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
Oh, that was so good. That was so good, man. That was the president of Argentina. And he's going to do great things. And he's doing great things, just like Bukele in Salvador. And also a lot of people don't like Bukele. This is a man that's the best president in the world. And now Trump is going to surpass him because he has way more issues to deal with. But now I'm going to show you this last video, right? This is what I mean about, I only enjoy watching the left-wing media just because the right-wing media is not as entertaining, because they actually tend to just talk about news, right? I'm not saying that they don't form their own opinion, and not saying that it's a little bit more on the right. It is, right? But I think they're a little bit more critical on the people on the right than the CNN. CNN is extremely woke. MSNBC is at the same level, but these people, just the fear mongering that these people spew all the damn time. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. So I just watch it just to listen to what they're saying and be like, hey, is what they're saying making sense, or are they just incredibly intellectually dishonest about anything that they're saying? But just take a look at how they talk about the Department of Education, and look how they try to the way they try to narrate Vivek and Musk and Trump and the cutting of the Department of Education. Just pay attention.
Stick around. Doge, and it's not just a coin, it's a whole new proposed government agency. It stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. It promises to revolutionize the federal workforce. It plans to do that by cutting deeply from everywhere across the government. So who does Donald Trump want to run it? Well, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. Joining the conversation is CNN contributor Kara Swisher, host of the podcasts On and Pivot. Kara, are you surprised to hear this?
No, it's an interesting stunt. Calling it Doge is cute. That's, of course, the coin that Elon likes. You know, it reminds me of a little bit of something called the Private Sector Survey on Cost Control. I don't know if you remember this. In 1982, Ronald Reagan instituted something that later got called the Grace Commission. And it was the phrase he used then was drain the swamp and be bold and work like tireless bloodhounds. Don't leave any stone unturned in your search to root out efficiency. So this isn't a new idea to bring in
Very true.
private sector people to do this. And I think it's a good thing to look through the government and figure things out. But a lot of this is done in a stunt-like fashion. I find it
stunt-like fashion. I do understand what she's trying to get at, right? Doge, that's just Elon Musk, kind of trolling right now at this point. But come on now. Vivek was essentially campaigning. This is some of the things he was campaigning when he was in the GOP, running the GOP. So it's not a publicity stunt. It's not just something just to say. They actually do believe that this is the best way to run the government efficiently.
interesting that a Department of Government Efficiency would have two heads. That's not very efficient, but fine. That's fine. You can think of names for like the Department of Grandstanding Edgelords, like that.
You see, it's just a joke. It's just a joke until you get checked.
It's
fine. It's fine. I don't know if it has any power. I think it's a good idea to always look at government spending. But this is a lot of a stunt. They're going to put everything online. They're going to show us stupid things the government pays for, I guess.
I have to say, I mean, Elon Musk has already been deeply ingrained in this transition planning, but he is also a huge government contractor himself.
That's correct.
He has business. He's got business before the government. And so, I know that ethics is sort of out of style these days, but I do have to wonder, what are the consequences of having someone who has so much financially at stake in where the government spends his money in a role like this?
Yeah, there's a list a mile long in this way. I think it's about $15 billion in federal contracts. And in fact, the government went a long way to saving Tesla when it was in trouble by giving it a loan. He's very beholden to the government. And, he was thrilled when he won some of those government contracts. I remember talking to him when he beat out Lockheed and some others. And I think he was right. We need to bring in innovation into the government. We have to figure out how to cut costs. But sometimes the government's not like a private company. You can't come in and just fire everyone and carry a sink into your thing and let this sink.
Why not? Why not? It's never been done before, but why not? There's no answers. They're gonna fearmonger you to believe like, oh, it's because of this, because of that. We need these jobs because of this. No, many of the jobs that we currently have now in many of these bureaucracies are not needed. They're not.
Sink in and not pay vendors and things like that. There's some very serious things the government does. And so it's fine to make a stunt and call out all the, the $600 toilets and all that stuff. And I'm fine with that, but it feels so stunty rather than actually a serious commission looking at what's happening. And, these guys need a lot of attention, so they'll...
They need a lot of attention. I mean, let's be honest. Elon Musk is one of the most famous men in the world. He owns some of the biggest companies in the world. I don't think he needs any more attention than he really has now. Vivek doesn't really need attention either. This guy's practically a billionaire. He started multi-billion-dollar companies. I mean, if any of these people are going into politics, I just don't see how it's for money. I just don't see it. For that, they stay in the private sector and continue to make more money. They don't need the government to do that. If anything, they'll pay the government appointees or politicians that are running for office, pay them and get whatever tax break or whatever they can, that can help their business grow even more. That will be the more efficient way to do it. So them going into government is just another way of them, actually, it's almost like a calling. Like they really want to make a difference. That's how I see it.
Whatever.
Well, look, Kara, stay with me. I'm going to bring it into the table for a second here because I think some people might think that we are exaggerating what the expectation is. But here is Vivek Ramaswamy in the GOP primary. I mean, this is when he was a candidate running against Trump. But this is his idea of where the federal government should be headed in terms of the workforce.
Mm-hmm. First, it will be a plan that reduces the size of the federal employee headcount by over 75% if I'm the next president by the end of my first term, 50% of which is implementable by the end of year one.
Okay, so let's talk about the 50%. I mean, let's take a look at the top 5 agencies as a percentage of the workforce. This is more than half of the government. Veterans Affairs, the Navy.
Look what she said. Okay, so let's look at the top 5 agencies, right? And it's pretty much the military, right? It's pretty much the military. Vivek has never talked about cutting the spending on the military. Why was that the first thing he brought up?
The Army, Homeland Security, the Air Force. This is
the military.
Yeah,
it's the military.
The military.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, the military.
A lot of money goes to the military.
Scott, I wonder. I mean,
Scott Jennings is the GOAT.
Everybody has slogans, and maybe some of this is gimmicky. But to your point, I'm going to take Trump seriously. 75% of the workforce is going to mean that everything gets slashed, including all of those agencies.
Is that what the press release said today when they announced this? That they were going to adopt Vivek Ramaswamy's campaign talking points? Look,
they did not.
They did not. Exactly. So why did you bring this up? This is what I'm talking about. Look how they tried to play the narrative behind. Let's take a look at Vivek. Take a small clip, take it out of context, just and then show another chart of the top agencies, federal agencies that we have, which is military, right? And just say, look, this is what he wants to cut. Well, he never said that. That's one. And then 2, they also never said that he was going to adopt that plan either. So why are you trying to play this narrative that they're going to try to cut military spending? They never said this. They never said this. This is why we no longer, people have been slowly going to the right. Because we cannot stand the BS and the lies, the propaganda that you guys are spewing. And Scott Jennings said it right there. Did they say they were going to do this? And then you see the other chick, I don't know her name, say, no, they did not. So then why are you saying that? Why are you saying that?
So I think they're here to look into things, as I understand it. And ultimately, Donald Trump will look at whatever they come up with and make decisions. Obviously, I don't think there's any interest on the part of the president to cut the military by 50 or 75%. He's never said anything like that. But if you want to look around the government, I don't think there's a single American who would say, yeah, I bet there is some stuff we could find if we really thought about it in terms of people, headcount, waste, fraud, abuse. Do we have duplicative bureaucracies out there that confuse people? I mean, there's all manner of efficiencies that could be achieved if someone were given the opportunity to look into it. So I have no expectation that they're going to come in and slash the military. In fact, I have some expectation they might do just the opposite. But I do have some expectation that the rest of the federal bureaucracy absolutely should be looked at. It may be on the chopping block, and I don't think there's going to be too many Republicans who are going to be upset.
Although Scott, what if the government, what if the military is inefficient? I mean, honestly, the problem here
there might be issues in the bureaucracy. I agree with you.
One of the things that wasn't in this, which was interesting, is Elon was saying they were going to cut $2 trillion. I think that's what he said, and none of that was in here. There's a lot of non-specifics. Yeah. And again, I'm all for commissions that look at these things, but it's a little different when you're talking about government versus a company of which you're emperor of, that you can do whatever you want, and that's
when you're emperor of. Like, why are these words being used? Why can't you just say, like, when you're running a company? You know what I mean? Like, again, this is the fear mongering. These key words that they use in some of these debates or conversations, just to get people to be afraid. Like, hey, look, these guys are a serious threat, but no one's falling for it. A lot of these words no longer have the same meaning as they did before.
It's a very different situation, and I think these are serious issues and they should be seriously considered. But naming it after like a coin, a digital coin, it's silliness to me.
Your problem but your problem is with Elon and Vivek being put in charge of it, I assume.
No, not at all.
Yes, it is. I love that Scott Jennings always challenges these people. You're upset. You are. She is. She's upset that don't get me wrong. Elon Musk is trolling a little bit. That's why he called it Doge, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's true. Look at the keywords you use: emperor, stunt, attention seekers. No, it's none of that.
These are serious issues and they should be seriously considered. But naming it after like a coin, a digital coin, it's silliness to me.
Your problem is with Elon and Vivek being put in charge of it, I assume.
No, not at all. No,
and we can be
like a large
condescending about it all we want, but they won, and now they get to be part of it. And that's what we're going to do.
There's another fundamental question, and that is this about seriously cutting waste, etc., or is there an ideological purpose in this that is part of a purge of various departments that Donald Trump thinks either shouldn't exist or that they exist in a nefarious manner that is meant to fight the policies that he wants implemented? And I don't think we have a clue about that, but knowing Trump, that this is a very attractive way to go.
There have been for many years efforts by Republicans, it's not new, to just get rid of entire parts of the government. Department of Education, Health and Human Services, things of that nature, housing and urban development. These are departments a lot of Republicans for a long time have not felt should exist.
Yeah, correct. None of this is new, and I think we finally have a president with a mandate and a demeanor that's willing to actually break glass to get it done. And before we quickly dismiss Vivek, and I agree, it feels a little gimmicky, Kara, and you know a lot about Elon as well, so I'm not putting that by you, but I do trust these two to give us some pretty good advice. A successful private equity guy, a man who's built some of the most amazing companies on earth, putting rockets in space and catching them.
Notice that every single time any of these people defend Elon Musk or Vivek or Trump, the entire panel just attacks them. They don't even let them finish what they're saying. That's CNN all the time.
But it had to be brought out by the government. I mean, I just think there's a fundamental difference between running a company and running government.
Not so much.
Right? Companies exist to make profit. Government exists to serve people and to...
You will hope that to be true, but that's not always the case.
Work in a common good. So I think putting two businessmen who have relied on government subsidies over what ultimately is going to be a purge of thousands and hundreds of thousands of middle-class jobs.
All around the country.
Middle-class jobs that are disproportionately held by Black Americans, by the way, because...
Race identity. Always. There's always that. It always comes back to that.
Working for the federal government is a way that they can mitigate discrimination. There's studies on this, right? That this is going to have a real economic impact. So sure, is there fat? Yes. I imagine there's fat in any company, including the companies that both of these men run. Sure. But the idea that two people who seem to know very little about the fundamental way the government works.
Very little? Really? These people are more informed of the way the government works than anyone else that's actually in politics. I can guarantee you that. Especially Vivek.
That everything cannot be cut away when you're actually trying to make people's lives better, and the economic harms of such a policy seem to me to be quite disastrous.
I think that's reasonable, but I do not trust anyone in the current federal government to understand anything about efficiency or waste.
Bingo. 100% correct. I do not trust anyone in the government right now to understand how to run these things efficiently. I just don't. There's no one there that knows any better. There just isn't.
All right. Anyone? Come on.
Very few. I mean, I think it's good to get a fresh set of eyes. $2 trillion is ambitious. Biggest cuts this Coolidge. I think it's a good thing. Why not?
It's fine to do it in this way, but it feels like The Apprentice here. It's like one of these trips, like go out and start a hot dog stand.
You might not like the branding, but the mission's good, right?
I always these ideas are great, but I would have a much more wide-ranging group of people. It feels stunty on something that's quite serious, and that's my issue with it. It's not the people. I'd like to have lots of people do this.
We will see if it's just rhetoric or if it comes to fruition, but I just want to know, Vivek Ramaswamy tweeted tonight, we can't reform the bureaucracy. The right answer, shut it down. So we'll see what he makes of that.
Shut it down.
That's called Look at Me.
Thank you for joining us, Kara.
That's called Look at Me.
Look at me. Also look at me.
Also look at me.
These people hate. They hate. They hate entrepreneurs. They really do. They do not want people to succeed. Like, they only want poor people to succeed, and it's just sick. And it's not poor people like these people that live in projects that they need help. It's just they don't want billionaires to succeed, but then they go around just calling them up. Hey, do you mind lending me $1 billion, Kamala Harris, so that I can run a campaign and pay all the other celebrities to endorse me, Kamala Harris, Oprah, Beyonce, the Stallion. Should I go on? I mean, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. We cannot trust these people. And empowerment education got to go. The FBI got to go. And if we can find other means to cut some of these bureaucracies, do it. They're useless. But again, I want to make this video a little. I mean, I don't want to make this video too long. But if you disagree with me, definitely let me know. I'm looking forward to how you guys view the plans and the changes that and the people that are being hired to make these cuts and essentially try to help make the government run more efficiently. But yeah, man, these bureaucrats, they suck, and it's about time that we completely get rid of them and build for a better future. And that's it for me.